In the quiet village of Sonepur, nestled between lush green hills and a winding river, lived a young man named Arjun. He was not the strongest or the richest, but he possessed something far more valuable, a sharp mind and an unyielding spirit. Arjun grew up in a humble hut with his mother, who worked as a seamstress, and his father, a farmer. From an early age, he showed an unusual curiosity about everything around him. While other children played in the fields, Arjun spent hours watching the village blacksmith, the carpenter, and even the traders who passed through Sonepur. He had an uncanny ability to observe and learn quickly. If the carpenter was carving a chair, Arjun would study his movements and later try to replicate them with a simple knife and wood. If the blacksmith was making a tool, Arjun would ask questions until he understood the process. However, in a village where tradition dictated one's future, intelligence was often overlooked. The villagers believed that hard labor was the only path to success, and they saw Arjun's curiosity as a distraction. One summer, disaster struck Sonepur. The village's main source of income, its wheat fields, began to wither, despite regular watering. The elders were puzzled. They prayed to the gods, but the crops continued to die. Arjun, however, refused to accept fate blindly. He began to investigate. He walked through the fields, observed the soil, and even tasted the water from the village well. Something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. One evening, while sitting by the riverbank, he saw a flock of birds avoiding a particular patch of grass. This made him think, what if something was contaminating the water? He collected samples from the well and compared them with water from the river. Using a simple method he had learned from the village healer, he mixed the water with crushed tamarind leaves. The well water changed color while the river water remained clear. Excited, he ran to the village headman and explained his findings. "The well is poisoned. That's why the crops are dying," he declared. At first, the villagers laughed. How could a boy know more than the elders? But when Arjun insisted, they tested another well in a different part of the village. The water there was clean. The elders decided to dig a new well near the river. Within weeks, the crops began to revive. The villagers were astonished. Arjun's intelligence had saved them from ruin. Word of Arjun's wisdom spread beyond Sonepur. One day, a wealthy merchant from the nearby town of Bhavnagar visited the village. He had heard of the young man's cleverness and wanted to test him. The merchant placed a bag of mixed grains, rice, wheat, and lentils before Arjun and said, "If you can separate these in one night without using your hands, I will give you 10 gold coins. But if you fail, you must work for me for free." The villagers gasped. This seemed impossible. But Arjun simply smiled and accepted the challenge. That night, he sat by the village granary, deep in thought. Then, he had an idea. He spread the grains on a flat mat and released a few hens. Within an hour, the hens had eaten only the rice, leaving the wheat and lentils behind. He then poured the remaining mixture into a shallow tray and blew gently. Since lentils were lighter, they moved to one side, while the heavier wheat stayed in place. By dawn, the grains were neatly separated. The merchant was astonished. "You are truly gifted," he admitted, handing over the gold coins. Arjun's fame continued to grow. One day, a scholar from the city arrived in Sonepur. He had heard of Arjun's intelligence and offered him a chance to study in the grand city of Ujjain. It was a difficult decision, leaving his parents and village behind. But his mother, with tears in her eyes, said, "Go, my son. Use your mind to change the world." With a heart full of dreams, Arjun left Sonepur. He promised to return one day, not just as a scholar, but as someone who would uplift his village. Years later, Arjun returned, no longer a village boy, but a respected engineer. He brought new irrigation techniques, better farming methods, and knowledge that transformed Sonepur into a prosperous town. His story became a legend, one that proved that true power lies not in wealth or strength, but in the ability to think, learn, and innovate.